Hello, folks, and welcome to my little corner of the world over to you. Thank you so much for joining me. It is summer 2025. Can you believe it? We are more than halfway through this year, chugging along. It is just absolutely beautiful, hot and humid here in the lovely southeastern United States of America. July 7th, 2025. It is a day to commemorate in so many ways. We're just on the heels of July 4th. I hope you all had a wonderful July 4th with your ballparks. And for me, it's always that 10K here in the Atlanta area called the Peachtree Road Race. But whether you did a 5K, 10K, or a marathon or whatever, God, marathon on July 4th, God, I can't even imagine. I don't know if anybody does that, but that might be happening. Who knows? Anyway, so here it is, July 7th. Here we are at the beginning of July, and so much going on. And to commemorate it, uh, it was Hawaii that was annexed on this date back in 1898. Can you believe Hawaii became a state? It is the southernmost state in the United States. That's always a stumper for most people. Somebody's always trying to get a zinger on you on that one. What's the southernmost state? It is Hawaii. And then somebody would say, well, not the continental US. But that is the truth. So anybody throws that trivia at you, go for it. It's Hawaii, the southernmost state. It's also Global Forgiveness Day. So forgive as much as you can on this beautiful date. Anyway, here we are in sunny July, and I am speaking today with a comedian. And I haven't spoken with comedians in so long. I really, really do miss that. I've spoken with Al Franken of Saturday Night Live fame, even before he became a senator, I believe. How many years ago that was? Daryl Hammond from Saturday Night Live, John Lovitz from that same program as well, Lewis Black of The Daily Show fame and fortune. And there is a lot of fortune, Lewis. You have earned it. I think he's somewhat retired after his Goodbye Yeller Brick Road tour. But Lewis, wow, great comedian. I love speaking with them. Just they're so honest and we really get into a good groove every single time. They're some of the most wonderful interviews. They really love talking about their craft. And JT Habersaat, who I'm speaking with today, is absolutely part of that. I had a great discussion with him. JT's out there just hustling and doing comedy in his own way and has found major league success in all of it. Along the way, he's been an author and he is out with a new book where he speaks with his fellow comedians, ones you don't hear about very much, and others who you do, like Weird Al Yankovic and also Patton Oswalt. So a lot of good people that he speaks with. And this book is fantastic. Comes out on July the 8th. So get it wherever you get those books. Barnes and Noble. You can get it online. You can get it on. Do they even call it a Nook anymore? I remember I got that device a while back. I really enjoyed that. And now I read books on my phone, but I really, really enjoyed that. So, anyway, enjoy our talk. We delve into so many different things, so many great stories. JT Haberswat. Hey, how you doing?
Hey man, how are you?
Good, hanging in there.
Good. You hear me okay? Everything cool?
Yeah, that's pretty good. Able
Good.
to see you as well. Thank you for the video as well. I put this on
Sure.
YouTube as well. So thank you
Okay,
so
I
much.
wasn't sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
Awesome. So where are you at this morning as we speak?
Austin this morning, where I'm based out of, but back in
Cool.
airports tomorrow, 4 a.m. So,
Constant travel, isn't it?
yeah,
It's
that's the name of the game. So, in
good.
Denver all weekend. Yeah.
Denver. Very good. Where are you playing at in Austin? Is that Joe Rogan's club?
I've been there a bunch, but no, I live here, so I'm just home and chilling for the moment. It's funny because when I'm Austin's such a crazy scene right now, but when I'm home, I don't do a lot of shows because I want to just that's when I write books or work
Yeah.
on other things, you know.
Well, it's a good atmosphere. How long have you been in Austin now?
20 years actually as of October. So native New Yorker, but been down here since 2005.
Nice change of pace to be able
Yeah,
to get down there.
yeah, it's definitely a different vibe. It took me a little while for my New York to kind of relax, you know.
Oh, I know, I
Yeah,
know, but it's really good and good place to visit. So I would definitely tell the CVB to get the word out. So you don't want to have too many
yeah,
people moving there.
yeah. I mean, it's definitely way different, obviously, but I still really like it here.
Yeah, yeah, a lot to do there and a lot of opportunity, especially with what you're doing as well. So, and
Yeah,
then,
I
yeah,
didn't even start comedy till I got down here, which was, but I mean, way before everything is like it is now, obviously. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunity here for sure.
yeah, and then great place to fly out in and out of. It's more of a central location, so you
That's
can,
crucial.
yeah,
I mean, we've kind of outgrown the airport. It's a great airport, but it's the population is so larger now than when I got down here initially that the airport can be zany, but it's still, it's 20 minutes away and goes pretty much anywhere you want to go.
yeah. Now, have you been on Joe Rogan's podcast? Has he
No, no.
invited
I
you
mean,
on?
we'll see what happens with this new book now because his head bartender at the club is a very old friend of mine, and her husband is in the book. A guy named Brett Erickson, who's
Yes.
one of Doug Stanhope's Unbookables, and and Brett. So there's a lot of crossover connect there, but I mainly go. It's funny. I I avoided getting COVID for 4 years until I went and saw my buddy Joe DeRosa at Rogan's Club and got caught COVID in the green room. So that was kind of hilarious to me. That
Yeah, I know he catches you. I got it well outside of the original pandemic. I'm like,
uh,
I think I'm cool here. What's going on? I'm healthy, like Joe
yeah,
always says. I don't do the vitamin drip like Joe does,
right,
but
right.
it's like, but yeah, like it catches you when you least expect it. I'm like,
Yeah,
racers.
it was
It's crazy.
hilarious after 4 years of fairly solid vigilance. I'm like, yeah, I was in a Joe Rogan's green room last night with UFC fighters smoking nonstop weed at me. So yeah, that's definitely how I caught it. But but yeah, I mean, there's literally we went from so many clubs that closed during pandemic. We're down to like I think two clubs that survived to now there's 11 in like 6 square blocks downtown. It's crazy.
Wow.
It's crazy.
Wow.
It's unsustainable is what it is, but it's
Yeah. I remember back in the 80s, especially when I
Mhm,
first moved here to Atlanta,
mhm.
we had punch lines. We had
Yeah.
numerous clubs. It was like a real trajectory and got to
Mhm.
see some really good local talent and then people who had come in nationally. It
Yeah.
was on a rise and then there was a dip there for a while.
Sure. The '90s was a weird time for stand up because the boom. Well, uh, people overextended. That suddenly every like Dairy Queen was a comedy club,
Yeah.
and that's unsustainable. I think that's kind of where we're at now a little bit. We'll see what happens. But it's different with podcasts and stuff too, and the internet. It's totally different than the '80s because you're not relying just on morning radio and word of mouth. Like there's I don't know. We'll see what happens. It's an interesting time.
Yeah, it was really, really limited how you could promote yourself back
Hmm.
then. Going those morning zoo crews and
Yeah, which
DJs.
are horrific. Those are those are the bane of the worst part of stand up. And there's actually a passage in the book where Doug Stanhope talks about he's like, back then you had either 5 channels on TV or it was let's go see live entertainment. And it was like,
Yeah.
you and some other comic, and no one cared if they knew who you were or not. They were happy you were there. And then the band Mustang Sally's up after us. Stick around, like it was very, very specifically funny.
I
Um,
always hear those horror stories like comedians opening up for musical acts. And like who
I've done a
thought of
lot of that. I've actually done a lot of that, more than most, and I've got the formula down. I've toured with bands like punk and metal bands for like uh, sometimes for like 3 weeks at a time, and the key is you have to be advertised. They have to know on the poster that there's a comedy aspect, so it's not why is this person talking. And I always have the lead singer of the headliner or someone notable from the main band come out and introduce me. And then I can do the job. But otherwise, it's real hard. It's like
Yeah.
running
Yeah.
uphill on roller skates because people just don't know what's happening and they're either annoyed or they're like, let's give it a shot. But it's so loud with people, milling about waiting for whoever to blast your ears off. Yeah, it can be tough.
Yeah, total different vibe. But I've heard like 70s and into the 80s. It was like,
Mhm.
why is somebody coming up there with the spoken word when they're expecting a loud band to come on the
Totally,
stage? House lights come down and mesmerized. It's just a whole
totally.
different thing.
And I mean, it can obviously. I tour sometimes with Lydia Lunch, who's a spoken word combative feminist, um, and for her or like a Henry Rollins to go up back in the day, like okay, because
Right.
that's kind of like aggression, just verbal, right?
Yeah,
But for
yeah.
me to go up and be like, let's have levity, it's not really. It's not that's not what a Melvin's crowd wants to hear, or what. So yeah. So how long are you born and raised Atlanta? Or
No, I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. So
oh,
I
cool.
remember growing up there, and
Sure.
there were comedy clubs down there in the Flats region over there.
Uh-huh.
I remember
Uh-huh.
seeing Bob Saget for the first time,
Wow.
and I was floored. I was like, I never watched those Friday night shows. I was already in
Yeah, yeah,
college by the time I
yeah.
saw
Because
him.
they're super corny, but he was
Yeah.
he was he was pretty raw.
Then I was just blown away. This
Yeah,
guy is like, whoa,
yeah,
really insanely fast.
yeah, yeah. I saw
Crazy.
one of his last shows actually. He did a festival in Houston, and then he passed away like 4 weeks later. It was crazy.
Freaky.
Yeah,
Absolutely freaky.
so
Yeah.
super weird way to go.
Yeah, and another time I was way younger, I was invited to a fundraiser for then Senator Howard Metzenbaum,
Whoa.
and it was Peter, Paul, and Mary, along with Chevy Chase and Robin Williams.
Holy cow, that's
And
amazing.
in a place called the Front Row, which was a theater in the round.
Uh-huh.
And I loved Robin Williams. I loved Chevy Chase. I was growing up on
Sure.
them. I had
Yeah.
older sisters, so I stayed up, saw Saturday Night Live when it had
Uh-huh.
started. So I was like
Yeah.
totally into all that stuff. And Robin, this was like maybe a few weeks after John Belushi died. And
Oh
he,
wow.
he had spent the last night with him. It's just like it was so freaky.
Wow.
And Robin was
Yeah.
just completely off the charts.
Yeah. Bobcat Goldthwait was like Robin's close. He said I was Robin's best man for like three of his weddings or something hilarious like that. And he tells a bunch of Robin Williams stories in the book as well. Like he was really close with him, and he's supposed to be the greatest guy. Chevy Chase, I hear, is thorny. Like, what did he do on stage? Because
He
he
did
doesn't
the
really.
pratfall. Yeah.
Okay, I was gonna say because he doesn't really do stand up. I'd be curious what Chevy Chase on stage.
Just goofing around.
Yeah,
He just
that sounds
like
great.
immediately I saw this very up close too. We had really good seats, and it's like no
Uh,
wonder this guy had issues getting injured. I'm like, he really took the
oh
falls.
sure, yeah, 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 yeah. He doesn't. Yes,
It was what it was. So yeah, I wasn't really surprised that there was like a drug habit there too as
right,
well.
right. That's wild. Uh,
Yeah.
I've done Cleveland a few times. I'm trying to think of the name of the club that there. It's a good club, but it's in like the entertainment district strip. You know what I mean? Like it's what is that name? I forget the name of the club, but it's a good club. And I'll actually be in Atlanta the beginning of August with Eddie Pepitone.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Is it one of the punchlines or
No, we're doing what is it called? Actually,
we
hang
do
on.
have
I
the
was talking with
Buckhead
a friend there.
Theater?
It's I was just there with just talking about this venue with a friend. Let me see.
Yeah, we got some good ones. It was just at the Buckhead Theater
Oh,
not
nice.
long
The
ago. Yeah,
Earl,
I
the
love it.
Earl, the Earl. It's like a rock club, I think.
Yeah, I think I've
I
heard
don't
of
know.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's been a minute since I've been to um, to that neck of the woods. But the last time I was there, I did the Laughing Skull Comedy Club, but I heard that's closing now. They just
Yeah, different. Yeah, I like that place too. Yeah, very, very nice. Yeah, Atlanta is like, it's a pass through. America's cold
sure,
home.
sure. Yeah, there was what was the theater I used to do too? There was a little theater there that was great. I do Star Bar sometimes. They still have their Monday night show, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Sorry, if I float at all, my cat is trying to make out with my computer at the moment. So
They
slowly
get into
pushing.
everything, those
Oh my
curious
god.
ones. Yeah.
So,
I
cool.
had kitty visitors here for a long time. They show up at the front door, come in, check out what I'm doing here
Yeah,
on
that's
video.
literally how she. Well, I've had her for a few years, and she just showed up at the door. This is excited to stay.
Very cute. So,
Cool.
doing this book, doing
Yeah.
time. This
Yeah,
is great. You did a lot of research or lots of talking, lots of interviews, kind of like how I do interviews. It's just you did
yeah.
a zillion, it seems like, and talked to such
Feels
a
like a zillion. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It was definitely. Well, I say in my author's intro, I say, I was once I realized there hadn't really been an oral history of stand up. Uh, I was like, well, there needs to be, like there should be. Why isn't there? And then I got really annoyed when I'm like, well, I could do it. It's
yeah,
like, goddamn, because I'm a comic, and so I have a lot of comic pals or peers. Not everyone in the book is a close friend, but everyone in the book is someone that I said my main criteria for the being in the book was that I had your cell phone number or I could easily
yeah,
reach you, because I'm sure you deal with this too, running a show. Like
yeah,
the dreaded industry gatekeepers of publicists. Publicists can be great, but they can also be a weird barrier to fun and rewarding things. And that's not me just being an outsider saying, "Oh, I couldn't get to this famous person." It's me being a comic and seeing my friends also frustrated, going, "My goddamn manager or whatever, never
yeah,
told me about this show because it was below my, theoretical pay grade." But I tour a lot with Brian Posehn from
yeah.
Mr. Show and
Love
Big Bang
Mr.
Theory
Show.
and all that stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, brilliant. And we've been friends for a very long time and worked together a bunch. And he said, he's like, the thing that the management and stuff forgets is that we got into this for fun. And sometimes if
yeah,
it's, half the money of what I normally would get, the fun part is off the charts. And I still want to know about those things, and a lot of times people just won't even bring it to their attention. And so uh, I started thinking, well, I know this person. I've worked with this person a lot. This person knows this person, and that's just kind of how I looked and said, man, I have like 60 to 80 real killers that
oh yeah,
are, range from super household names of the Maria Bamfords, Patton Oswalts, all those folks, to comics. I don't even want to say lesser because that's incorrect, but working class comics that are, which is what I consider myself, which are comics with real credits. They've done TV stuff, they've done the road extensively, they've worked with really professional comics for a long time, and it's their job. But people like Carmen Morales out of Los Angeles, who's done
yeah,
HBO and done all these things. But to hear off the top of your head, Carmen Morales might say, "Oh, that sounds a little familiar," but Vanessa Gonzalez, who is blowing up right now, one of Variety's comics to watch and all that sort of stuff, and
yeah,
tours with Chelsea Handler, and there's a lot of people that um, you may off the top of your head not know their name, but the hope is, well, in this mix of uh, names that you do know, hopefully by the end of the book you feel like you know them. You know what I mean? And so it was really important to me to not just have it be all uh, TV stars and stuff like that, because that's kind of a different experience than a working class comic, which is just someone that goes and does the job and has the more of the ups and downs of, is anybody coming tonight?
hmm
And also oftentimes they are. Oftentimes you're pleasantly surprised doing a 100-seater, and it's like, yeah, there's a line out the door, and hooray, we're gonna have a great show.
yeah.
Um, so I really wanted it to be a real look behind the curtain on the realities of what it is. You know,
Yeah, yeah, because a lot of people just don't see these things. Growing up, Carson would call out somebody. You don't know what's going
right,
on behind the
right.
curtain.
That's something that's addressed too, is the evolution of how late night used to be crucial. Like late night could um, literally change you from being a club comic to a theater comic within a week. But that was super rare. Like to get that spot, you really had to be a shining star, or you know um, again, Bobcat talks about that in the book. Says he's like, the only time I've seen that happen was with Stephen Wright. He's like, he's
Yeah,
literally the only comic I've ever seen where he, the word of mouth was strong. I think it might have been like USA Today or somebody came and saw him and wrote a piece, and he was in the newspaper, and then a week later he was on the Tonight Show or what, and he said, and after that it was straight shot to the moon. He's like, but largely it's a myth, because and now,
Oh
I
yeah.
have many friends who have done late night. I work with Eddie Pepitone a ton. He's been on Conan and Jimmy Kimmel and
Uh,
every aspect, and not just doing stand up. Like he's involved in sketches with them and all sorts of stuff. And it's yeah. Gary Gulman, who's a really great comic out of New York, has a great quote in there where he says, "Doing late night is like having an extra birthday." He's like, you do it. Some people take you out to dinner.
yeah.
Everybody calls and says, "Great job," and then you move on. It's not. It just doesn't move the needle like it used to. So
Yeah.
the evolution of what's important is wild, and it always changing. You know.
Yeah, and this as a performer, 'cause I did a stand-up class like a lot of people have, and when you do that, you do your bit, you do your 5 minutes, and you feel like you're 50 feet tall,
Sure.
and then
Yeah.
yeah, it's coming
Yeah.
down off of that. I'm sure
Yeah.
that's something that you're so used to, and every comic you've spoken with here, it's
Yeah. Yeah.
wow.
And I mean, that's how I think people get the bug, so to speak. Where you do it a couple times and you get that kind of rush of. For me, it was always not padding the deck. Like going into a place that has no invested interest in liking me and then having it go well. That's a real test. That's a real litmus. But conversely, that 50-foot high, if it doesn't go well, you feel 50 feet small.
Oh my gosh. Oh yeah.
It's there's not. I always
Yeah.
say, because people always say, I've always wanted to try it. I feel like stand up is one of those things that, my office coworkers always said I
Yeah,
should
they
try
think
them.
you're
You
funny.
know what I mean? And I always say, good, do it, but do it twice. I'm like, you can't do it once and then have that be the experience. You need to do it twice, because the first time anybody does it, all of your coworkers who have been saying you're funny are going to come. They're all
Right,
going to
right.
come.
Yeah.
All of your, intermediate social circle is going to come. Your family's going to come, and it's going to go great because you padded the deck in some regard. The next time you say, "Well, that was amazing," and you have that high for a few weeks, and then you say, "Man, I want to try that again," and you go back, and the second time, "Oh, we've got the kids tonight," or whatever. People are a little more busy. Maybe you get a handful of your friends there, and the rest are just paying strangers, or just
Yeah.
as I most comics will tell you, an open mic is other comics waiting to go up and could give a shit about whatever
Exactly.
you're
Yeah.
saying. They're looking at their notes, and it doesn't even mean you necessarily bomb. It just means it doesn't go as well. And that's the reality of what most of the early stages is finding your footing, finding your voice, and dealing with indifferent crowds or crowd. But it's also a true test of the material, right? And so if you do it twice and you still want to stick with it, then I'm like, okay, well, then you have potential to maybe want to do this. Most people don't. I think most people say, "Oh yeah, I tried stand up once. It was 50% great and 50% not fun at all."
Right,
There's
right.
nothing will deflate that ego balloon faster than
Sure.
going after, "Last time this was amazing, and this time, yeah." One joke got a little bit of a laugh, and the waitress kind of scowled at me, like so. Yeah, it's I encourage everyone to try it, but the people that it's such a tough job year after year, also in terms of financial stability, because you're essentially freelance completely.
Oh, it
And,
is. It
and
is.
it's like acting, I guess, where you never, once your current job is done, you're unemployed until your next job shows up. That's just how it is.
Yeah. So they dubbed you the Godfather of punk rock comedy. That's
Yeah.
an interesting time. How did that
Um,
stick with you all this time?
that kind of was a little bit of a self fulfilling prophecy in that I was a punk rock kid. Like I still largely
I love it.
come came from that New York world where I lived upstate, but once I could got my driver's license, I can go to the Metro North train. I would take the train from Poughkeepsie, New York, down to the Lower East Side whenever I could, as
Oh,
like a 16 or 17-year-old, and go see shows at CBGB's or wherever. And so um, I was very immersed in that world of the punk rock scene of the early '90s into through the 2000s, and saw not just punk rock with a capital P, but avant-garde bands. Bands like Boss Hogg with John
yeah.
Spencer Blues Explosion, Luna, stuff like that. That really was DIY, but also artsy in a way that was, sometimes a little pretentious, I guess. But bands like the Yeah Yeah Yeah, stuff like that, that I
I
really,
remember that.
raw and exciting. And so, I was a college radio nerd. Also, I went to SUNY New Paltz, and I was the music director of the college radio station, and was all about that and promoting shows and stuff like that. I was a show promoter. I was in a couple bands, but largely just for fun. No, like real, like we're gonna make it. It was like fun bands. And so when I moved to Austin in 2005, that's when I was like, well, I kind of wanted a break from all that stuff. I was burned out on promoting shows, and I was running a zine called Altercation Magazine.
Oh,
And I started saying, well, I've always wanted to try stand up for real. Let's try that. So around 2007, I started doing stand up. And I didn't want to go the traditional route of go to the comedy club, wait, see eventually you
sure,
get to
sure.
host for 10 minutes, the whole, way you're supposed to
Paying
do
your
it.
dues.
Because I was used to just like, oh, we don't have a venue. Well, I know this library that's closed. Let's go put on a show there. What do you mean? Yes, we do. We just find one. Just because the rock club says no doesn't mean we don't do the show. And so I had that mindset. So I just booked myself shows with bands, or even just headlining, even doing 30 minutes at a club, and a lot of my rock friends would show up. So I was very immersed in the music scene pretty quickly. um, and I realized it was around the time too the comedians of comedy was happening, and a lot of people were saying screw the clubs, like the clubs aren't, they're feeling like dinosaurs, they don't get.
Yeah,
It was the boom of, not the boom, it was the dawn of alt comedy, what's known as alt comedy, which is
yeah, yeah.
also, that's intentionally when I wanted the book to start. So when it says oral history, I'm not talking about Lenny Bruce, I'm really not talking about the 80s,
The usuals. Yeah,
because that's been done. And I really wanted to concentrate on contemporary, which to me is 90s till today. And so, things like Mr. Show, things like the Kids in the Hall, and a
oh yeah,
lot of those Kids in the Hall are in the book, and so, um, things that were really kind of groundbreaking and remain groundbreaking, but were very against the mainstream at the time. Not in a combative way, not saying screw the mainstream, but just in the nature of what they wanted to do creatively was flying that weird flag. And I really related to that, the true alternative back when that word meant something. And
yeah.
so I looked at people like Janine Garofalo or Doug Stanhope or the comedians of comedy, David Cross, and they were all doing rock clubs. And I said, that's the way to do it. And
Yeah.
so I started doing shows around Austin in alternative venues, which at the time was real weird. People and comics were, because I was a new guy in town. Also, by that stage, comics were a little chip on their shoulder about me. It's kind of like, who the hell do you think you are to not do it the right way?
Yeah,
And
that's
so
gotta be
people would.
tough.
So if I'd show up to the Velveeta Room, which is like the legendary open mic small club here that's still going, I'd be very friendly and whatever, but I could get some sideways glances going, oh, that's the guy who thinks he's too good to do the right way and he's booked his own show. And I checked it out, and yeah, there were people there. I was real pissed off. Like
It's
that's not supposed to
it's
happen.
yeah.
And conversely, it ended up being a little bit of uh, a way for me to stand out. So when the Janine Garofalos or whoever came to town, they said, "Who's doing left of center stuff?" And everybody said, "Oh, that's JT's doing stuff," and they would book me. So I was probably less than a year in, and I was opening for Doug Stanhope, and that's how Brian Posehn and I met. And um, I did a show with Andy Dick,
Oh,
which
Andy
was
Dick. Oh my
which was
gosh.
as insane as you can imagine.
Haven't heard that
Legendary.
name in a while. Yeah. Talk about
Right. Yeah, that was probably, I've been doing this almost 15 years, and that was probably the most insane hot mess of a show I've ever seen. I was very happy to be a part of that, where it was not, I didn't promote the show, I was just the hired help. And so I could just kind of stand back and go, wow, this is really crazy. Um, but anyway, to your question,
yeah.
about 2009, 2010, I decided I want my own kind of comedians of comedy slash Ramones vibe. And so I started booking this thing called the Altercation Punk Comedy Tour, which was a
Oh,
branch off the brand Altercation Magazine, which was my zine that I had run. And I assembled I had done Van's Warped Tour at that time, a couple spots on that, and met some comics that were. I'm like, well, if they're on the Van's Warped Tour, they kind of have a punk aesthetic, probably. And so I met a guy on there. I met a spoken word heavy metal guy named Duncan Wilder Johnson out of Boston, who's still
hmm.
doing stuff. He's great. Um, there was a woman in Austin named Ruby Collins, who I thought was really funny and doing very uh, unique and kind of edgy for a woman at that time, like very not dirty necessarily, but edge. I was like, wow, she's got guts to say some of this stuff. And so I assembled this rotating lineup of about 4 to 6 of us, depending on where we were. And we toured like I, I'm a Black Flag kid, so we just
Yeah.
booked. We did a tour one time. It was 4 weeks of shows with one day off to fly from New York to the West Coast. That was our only day off, and that
Mm,
is unsustainable and insane. But
yeah.
however, I should also mention that I was like 33 when I started, so I was not by any means like a 19-year-old
It's
Henry
a big
Rollins
difference.
doing
Yeah.
Black Flag, where to quote him, you could live on a candy bar in hatred. Uh,
It can't last forever. It
I,
catches up with you.
I look back now on some of the scenarios. Like we did a show one time in somewhere in Oregon, and the van had broken down, and it was at some pizza shop on a Sunday, and I hadn't booked the show. One of the other comics had, and we walked in there, and it was no one. It was I call it comedy a hijack situation where no one knew comedy was happening. It was very apparent, and then you're eating your pizza dinner, and then you look over and someone's just talking in the corner, like what is happening? And every TV was on and it's showing sports, and so it was not good. And we were very tired, and the car had broken down that day, and we needed to get it fixed. And they basically said, "Oh, here's your pay," and they gave us pizza. Pizza was the pay,
Oh gosh.
and I
Talk
was like,
about paying
"What?"
your
They
dues.
paid literally in cheese and sauce, and so um, I was like, "Well, we have no place to stay. Like we can't even sleep in the car because the car is at the mechanics. Like, what are we gonna do?"
Oh
And
gosh.
I basically said to the comic who had booked it, I'm like, you need to find us a place to stay. And he basically shook down the promoter and said, look, we have to stay at your house. Like, we'll take the pizza pay, but we have to stay at your house. And of course, because it was a promoter at a pizza venue, they had a very small 1 bedroom at most apartment. And I remember I slept sitting up. Like I was in
Oh my gosh.
an easy
Terrible.
boy, lazy boy chair sitting up, barely sleeping, and I was driving. So I'm like, I have to drive the next day and somehow figure out how to pay for the repairs on this car. And I woke up in the morning and my entire arms and most of my legs were bitten by fleas.
Oh jeez. Not to mention, yeah, all the orthopedic things that are happening to you, and then the fleas.
And then I just wake up and just like covered in flea, and so
Oh,
that's obviously a bit of an extreme thing, but also not that
yeah.
weird. Not that it was just not that it wasn't that people would rip you off, although that happened once or twice. It was more that the circumstances were so unsustainable. And you're touring with 4 or 5 people. So it's like take that pizza, divide it by 4 or 5.
Yeah.
It's not,
Yeah.
and so um, I look back now and was like, how did I even survive that? How did I not find a credit card and just get on a plane and go home? Like I don't know. I was
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
determined not to, but boy,
Yeah.
those circumstances are.
Yeah, it makes you stronger. Whatever is not going to kill you, it's going to make you stronger
Oh
for
man,
sure.
there's times now, not to sound like a princess or anything, but there's times now where um, if the venue will be like, "Hey, we have a comedy condo," which is not weird, and some can be amazing. Like, I'm going to Denver this weekend, but I was there with Posehn uh, back in when was it? Earlier this year. Let's say maybe like March or February because it was cold. Uh, but
Yeah,
that's
you
that could
remember
be
that in
June in
Denver.
Denver. Um, but the club there has a comedy condo, and I was like, oh boy, here we go. Let's see what this is like. And it was gorgeous. It was like nicer than most
Mm.
high rise apartments, but that's not always the case. And so there's certainly been some where I've gone in and been like, man, all right, I'll tough this out, but I'd rather buy my own hotel than stay in this kind of crummy dump,
Oh yeah.
And but back in the day, I'd be happy to have a roof and not have a flea couch. So, um, but once I applied the punk rock thing, the punk comedy tour, that stuck to me because it was a rotating lineup and I handled all the booking and routing. And I could do that easily. I could book us easily because I had been in bands and I put on shows. So I knew
Sure.
the promoter in Gainesville, Florida. I knew the promoter in Atlanta. You know, Rodney Leet of Star Bar. He's
Yeah.
from Rodney's an old punk rock guy. And so uh, it was easy to book because it's not like we were a huge guarantee. We're charging $5 to $10 at the door, and some shows were great. Some we were the first comics to do Fest in Gainesville, which is still a big punk rock festival. We did some really cool things, um, but it essentially became as lineups shifted because the other thing is when you're in dire economic situations and you're 4 to 5 creative, essentially lead singers, because that's what stand-ups are. They're solo,
Right.
they're lone
It's just
wolves,
you.
essentially, and varying degrees of drunkenness and stuff like that. People not used to being on the road and suddenly, woo, like
Yeah.
because even if not getting paid, the drinks are usually free. Um, I had to shift around members quite a bit, and it essentially became the Altercation Punk Comedy Tour was JT and whoever he's bringing.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Rotate them in and out. Yeah.
Right. And
Keep them.
so in 2012, I did a show at South by Southwest, and as the Altercation Punk Comedy Tour, and the crowd was insane. It was a packed out show in a black box theater, and somebody got offended by something my good friend Mac Lindsay said, who's in the book. Mac and I met on Warped Tour, and he's such a great comic. Uh, and the guy stood up, and they almost got into a fist fight on stage. And it
Jeez.
was I had to get up on stage and be like, "Calm down," like, and then and then uh, I went up on stage, and somebody ran in and said, "JT, they're on your van." I said, "What?" And I had to run off stage, and they were fighting on my van, like fist fighting. And then
Gosh.
somebody, I don't know who it was, started shooting off fireworks
Oh, jeez.
in the
People
parking
are
lot. Like, it was bedlam.
gunshots everywhere.
It was bedlam. And this guy Dan, who runs Stand Up Records, which is a Grammy-winning label out of Minneapolis, was at that show and came up to me at the end and said, "Hey, I want to sign you." And
Nice.
so that I put out a record as me and the Altercation Punk Comedy Tour with Stand Up Records in 2012. Got Raymond Pettibon, who did all the Black Flag and Sonic Youth artwork, to do the cover, which was amazing.
Cool.
Um, through various associations of having worked with Henry Rollins once or twice, and just kind of weaved my way through until I got to Raymond, and he is an amazing. He's a genius, but he's an amazingly generous guy. He refused to take money for it and anything. He was great, and we're still. I, pals is a weird term. I've been to his studio and stuff in New York, and during pandemic, we traded art in the mail, which was for 15-year-old me. My head would have blown up if you ever told me that. I
Wow.
have the Black Flag bars on my arm, and to even get to hang out with Raymond Pettibon in any association would have been mind blowing to me. But to trade art, we sent each other Christmas gifts. Anyway, this is not to be all braggy, but it's to
Yeah.
say, uh, you know, having the guy who was the punk rock artist on my vinyl record reinforced the punk rock tag for me. And then in 2014, which is when I left my last desk job, went full time, the Austin Chronicle put me on the cover, and the headline was like "Punk and Punchlines," and they had me dress up like one of the Misfits with the
Oh,
whole
cool.
Misfits makeup, and I'll show you the.
It's perfect for
I have
Austin.
a
Yeah.
copy of it. Yeah, I don't know if I have a copy around, but they put me on the cover for that, and so that was kind of off to the races. And after that, every interview I did was, "So what's punk comedy? Are you
Yeah. Yeah.
telling why did Danzig cross the road? Like what is it?"
What is that?
And then I had
Punk
to
meets
explain, which to me, and this remains to me, the gist of what I was going for is, I said it's the Fugazi Discord approach of just, we're going to bypass clubs that put parameters on. You can't talk about atheism, or you can't talk
oh
about gay
gosh.
rights, or there's certain
Hmm.
things that would make uh, the comedy crowd going public who may not know, they're just there for entertainment, bristle a little bit, or you get a nasty comment card of like, I didn't like them attacking my whatever.
Oh
And not
gosh.
that we would attack things, but we'd talk about, I'm a George Carlin disciple,
Yeah,
and
yeah, oh
so,
yeah.
so
He's
at that
awesome.
time, the concept of free speech and comedy was a very different conversation than it is now. Um, but at that time, that's what informed it. And uh, it was just trying to not wait on the industry to come to you. It was like, well, okay, if somewhere along the line my career and industry meet, that's great, and I'm happy to work with you, and I'm happy to do clubs, but not under, hey, we'd love to book you, but you can't do this, 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 this. I'm not interested in that.
Yeah.
And so that's how the punk thing came about. That's Chicago Now called me the Godfather of punk comedy, and that really kind of, that quote took off to the stratosphere. And so after that, when I would do festivals, because I essentially around 2013, 2014. That was the last time I wound down working with a group of comics at a time. It was unsustainable, and I just went solo essentially, and would bring a feature with me that I liked. So I would headline and bring one person, and then the rest would be locals or whatever. And that was doable. Um, and I got lucky because I met some great comics that became touring features and friends. I'm friends with to this day. Kristen Leidy out of Green Bay, Wisconsin. Um, Josh McClain out of Memphis. Jay Chenoine out of Manchester, New Hampshire. And so these are all really strong comics that
Yeah.
I was happy to kind of like bring along with me and help showcase and make it a better show, because they would make me work harder. They're so good. And so that, I know it's a very long answer, and I'm sorry for the long tail on
No,
this
that's
kite.
good.
But,
Good
it,
stories.
that is where the punk rock thing came from. And then I'd say, well, I'm like, what year are we? 2025?
Yeah.
I'd say
Amazing.
by 2016, about 2 years after I went full time, I started to find the punk tag limiting, in that people were throwing that into every press thing I did. And, I'm like, by this point, I have, two additional albums out, it's two additional specials after that first altercation tour one. And I said, I really need to drop that tag, because it's starting to, because that by that point I was doing a lot of comedy clubs, and I'm like, it's starting to limit, more of a question mark on the part of bookers that I'm working with, saying, "Oh, is he going to throw chairs at people? Is he going to do some Gigi Allen shit? Like, what does that mean?"
Yeah, yeah,
And then
like
I have to
yeah.
say, "No, no, 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 no. It's not going to be combative at all. It's not going to be, inside." They were also concerned it'd be so inside baseball with the material that people, you know,
It
hey, isn't it
does, yeah.
crazy that, how how many bass players from the Sex Pistols does it take to pull, whatever, like, I didn't the audience didn't feel like they needed to have a leather jacket on to go in and get the material. So I dropped the punk rock tag, and largely that was the one of the best things I've done. And I say best in terms of, it opened me up to a larger audience, and it also opened up to, you know getting the phone call from Eddie Pepitone saying, "Hey, I'd really like to start
Yeah.
touring with you."
Yeah.
Because Eddie's a big music guy, but I honestly think if I was just the punk rock comic, he might be a little scared of what that means also. Like, so once I dropped that, it was a broader audience. But I also like having that lineage, because I don't think I would have. I'm the only stand-up comic who's ever toured with Lydia Lunch, and I don't think that
Yeah.
would have come about if I didn't have that lineage. You know,
Yeah. It's really good.
so
Yeah.
it's
I
so
could
I'm
see
proud
that.
of it. I'm proud of having that background, but also I don't really yell that to the rooftops anymore.
Yeah, it's a good idea not to paint yourself into that corner because you're going to really
Sure.
limit yourself that way. This way, you could expand beyond it. I could see them being nervous. Like, I remember Bobcat going crazy on Larry Sanders. If you remember
Oh,
that
sure.
episode, like he
Yeah,
trashes the set. I could see them like having visions. Was he going to come in here and just trash this place? It's like
totally.
punk. Oh my gosh. Yeah, this is
Right.
really off the
Right. It's
rails.
a great tagline, but it doesn't necessarily mean people are going to come even if you get press, because they're scared of what it might mean, or they might feel like I'm not going to get it.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
they're just like, I don't. It's too cool for me or something, something. I don't want that. I want the challenge for me then was to say, okay, I'm going to take my sensibilities of DIY and punk rock, and I am going to do this mainstream club and see if I can make these people that don't know me and don't know that world laugh. There's nothing more rewarding to me now than to
Yeah.
have a crowd of people that are my parents' age and, college kids and a cross section of society and be able to get them all. You know what I mean? To make them all to do the
Yeah.
job and get them all on board. That's what's really rewarding to me now. And that doesn't mean catering to what's contemporarily popular or catering to what's topical news wise. I don't do a lot of like, this is in the news, that type of stuff, but just hitting on things that are universal in a way, and universal for me is angst
We
and
all, yeah.
rantiness
Yeah. Yeah.
and, observational, what the hell's, like just really, and so, yeah, I'm much more satisfied, I think, now with the end result than back then in terms of I was kind of speaking to, and the people who liked it back then really liked it, but it was kind of speaking to the converted already a little bit.
Yeah. It seemed like you were heavily into the 90s with the zines. That kind of
Yes.
brings back those kind of memories. These days, it's, we got podcasts, we got YouTube, people
Yeah.
doing actual specials on YouTube. They don't have to
Sure.
wait for Max or HBO Max to come get them.
Yeah.
It's you could do this
Yeah.
on your own Netflixes. So
Hmm.
that's just totally exploded. It's a great thing, but the problem is like everybody could do this now. It's just like
Yes.
it's wide
Yes, but
open.
it's also I still think like the YouTube thing, that's a great example because I've done film specials and stuff, and my most recent special I just did audio. It was for 800-pound gorilla called Swamp Beast, and I just did audio and vinyl. Because it's a pain in the ass to carry around, but people like it, and I can sell a decent amount of vinyl. But my last film special was on DVD, and it's still on DVD. And people don't have a
Wow.
DVD player anymore. It's just hard to. People like it,
Yeah.
but you can't. Like, I don't know how to play it. It's like cars don't even have CD players in them anymore.
I
It's like, where do you
know.
play a
Yeah.
CD? And so part of it is just the technology thing, but the YouTube thing I think is great because yes, anyone can put it out there, but YouTube, it doesn't mean anyone has to watch. You
Right.
know,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
There's a lot of
Uh,
content.
it's easy to get a chip on your shoulder saying, wow, this person got a Netflix special and probably got Netflix money, and I'm watching this, and boy, does it suck.
Yeah.
And I'm not naming names, but there's comics that I've watched their specials, and it's taken me 2 or 3 times to get through it. And the weirdo that I'll watch stuff that isn't even for me because I like to study the craft of it and be like, okay, well, why do people like this?
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm
Yeah.
just perplexed. Sometimes I'm like, oh, well, the mainstream is sometimes wrong.
Sure.
Somebody
Sure.
bought all those Creed records and it wasn't me. Uh, so,
I can't argue
some,
with success.
you know,
It's like,
like good for them. I'm sure they could give a shit what I say. But,
yeah.
there's a lot of stuff I think is real terrible that's super popular. So some
It
of it's just that.
does.
But there's
Yeah.
other times where I'm genuinely perplexed as to like who is the audience who's loving this?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's like the Applebee's of comedy. Like I
Yeah.
just don't
How
understand.
does that happen? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just it's not terrible, but it's so mediocre. And so the YouTube thing is really intriguing to me because you can have comics. I do shows with this outfit called Don't Tell Comedy. I don't know if you're familiar with Don't Tell, but they
Familiar.
put on secret shows. They started in L.A., New York, and they basically branched out and have producers in almost every city. And they do shows where you buy a ticket, you don't know who's on the lineup, you don't know the venue, and it's kind of a speakeasy vibe. So I've done them I did one in Minneapolis in a car auto parts garage with cats running around. I've done them in, uh, weightlifting places. Like they're
Oh,
all
that's
over the
funny.
place. So it's fun, and they're usually BYOB,
Yeah.
and tickets are 25 or $30, and so they pay you pretty okay. And the audiences, I don't think I've done one that hasn't sold out. Like they're just really fun. But they started doing uh, for the more kind of on the rise comics, they'd film sets. Eddie Pepitone just did one, and they film in New York or LA, and they're 15-minute sets, and their views can number in the millions. Like that's been a game changer because it's just on YouTube, and so it's a way for there's a guy. there's a lot of comics that are people that I know, but I've seen them kind of have their star elevated by doing those, and the audience is discovering them. And so YouTube can be really effective for that. And as far as I understand it, if you get large numbers, because you see major, Ari Shafir, I think, released his last special on YouTube. It's a common
Wow.
thing now. It's not a. It doesn't feel like a nobody bought it, so I guess I'll put it out on YouTube. It feels like an actual move,
Good. Yeah.
because if you get, well, Shane Gillis is another one. He put his out on YouTube. They filmed out in Austin, and the numbers are through the roof and undeniable. And you get money from YouTube for those views. It becomes a business model of itself. And so for me, specials are always a document in time, obviously, but more to the point, there's something that I want people to hear. I want it to be asses and seats. I want people to hear it and go, "Oh, I
Sure.
like that. I'm going to check him out next time he's in town." That's
Yeah.
what a special is to an end to me. In addition to, a record of where you are at that time.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not like I go back and listen to them. Some I like more than others. So I think they're all pretty okay. But uh, the YouTube thing I think is really intriguing because it really is kind of a taking the middleman out of it. Anybody can upload a special to
Sure.
YouTube, and if it takes
Absolutely.
off, hooray for you. And
Yeah.
I've also seen people who put a lot of production money into filming a special, and it looks great, and then it comes out on YouTube, and I check a month later, and it's got 800 views, and I'm going,
Yeah.
oof.
I
you
know.
know,
You feel for them. You
I
do.
do, but that doesn't mean it's always going to be there. It's got a long shelf life. Maybe something pops down the road. Maybe who knows?
Yeah, like you were talking with Weird Al Yankovic and
Yeah,
UHF, which like bombed.
totally.
Totally. Huge disappointment. Then like it becomes what his Citizen Kane years later.
Yes, yes, yes. I mean, and it's funny to think because Weird Al is such an icon.
Yeah.
Like, if a Weird Al movie came out now, think of how strong that audience would be. Like, people would buy tickets in advance. And so, yeah. I mean, it's part of it is just time and place. Because when UHF came out, I think it was still video stores. I don't think
Yeah.
DVDs were even around. So it was like if you didn't
Yeah.
see it at the the multiplex,
Yeah. Things just
So
disappear. Maybe it comes
yeah,
out on videotape, like
maybe,
way
but
later.
even then it was such a word of mouth, but I'm nostalgic for that too. I like that because I was the real currency was, wow, this is cool and you need to see it. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
it was, but you can't live there in the past and
Yeah.
that stuff,
It's like
but
what's old is new again. I can't see A-Track making this resurgence, but there are people who collect that crap and VHS tapes. It's like,
man, I never thought I'd go into a club and see, I went into a club and there was like a cigarette machine, right? But it was for cassettes. It was for cassette tapes. And I was like, what? And so kids are buying boom boxes and listing, which cool, right on. But I never would have guessed that cassette. Vinyl, yeah. Vinyl has that kind of
right.
always been cool, always will come around again thing. Cassettes?
Yeah. Not really
Like, what,
sustainable. Yeah. Tape.
what do you have an IROC? Like, what do you like what's going on? So, but also right on whatever you're into, you know.
Right.
But when people approached me actually and said, "Would you ever?" When I was doing my last vinyl for my album Swamp Beast, I said, "Would you ever want to do cassettes?" I'm like, "Absolutely not. I am not like I'm not carrying around cassettes. Like I just am not." But bands do it. Bands. I see it.
If it works, it works.
Um,
It's
yeah.
getting your stuff out there and any way to distribute that as well.
And they
So
know their audience.
yeah.
They're just the reality is they're younger than me, and they know
Yeah.
the people that they will reach through that, and good for them. I don't know those people.
It's weird to see that. So how long did this book take to put together? You did all these interviews.
Wow,
Was
it
it
was so
over?
much work, man. I've written two other books before this, but this I got the idea, fortunately slash unfortunately, at the end of COVID, like around 2021, is when I was like, I think I want to tackle this. Um, and so the good part was when I started calling people, a lot of people were still home and couldn't tour, and so they were available, and so I could get a lot of people on the phone. And then once around 2022, when things were a little more sane and a little more social, I started doing as many in person as I could. And so I would fly to LA, or when I was in LA or when I was in New York doing stuff, I would find whoever was home and would sit down with them. So that's, I sat down with Todd Glass and
Mhm.
Tom Rhodes and, Patton Oswalt and all those folks. Um, and so uh, start to finish 3 years. Because what I had to do was, I think back now and I'm like, how? It sounds so insane
Yeah.
labor wise. I basically interviewed 60 to 70 comics or whatever's in there. And then I transcribed all the interviews. And then I went through interview by interview and broke down the sections, the chunks of conversation, which could range from a sentence to a paragraph, depending on what was being discussed topic wise, of what I thought was important for the book out of those. Because the interviews could be anywhere from, I think the shortest interview was probably 30 minutes, and the longest was, I talked to Greg Turkington, Neil
Uh,
Hamburger, who's such a great guy, and he hadn't done press in 10 years. I had to do an interview
good.
before the interview to say, hey, would you be interested in doing this? And he said yes. So that is, I think it's probably Greg's last interview that he will ever do, and it was his first in 10 years. And we talked for 2.5 hours, I think, something like that. And so um, the lengths were very varying, but not short. None were short. And so I had to transcribe all those, pull out the chunks that I thought were relevant, take those chunks and put them into, okay, this needs to be in the first part of the book, the second part of the book, or the third. Because it's very much, I describe it as an airplane ride, where the beginning is like early childhood
Yeah. Beginnings.
influences, how you got into stuff. The bulk of the book is about doing the job and the realities of stand up. And the closing, the landing is essentially, what did you learn, advice, things like that. And so I took all those quotes and I said, this goes in this first part of the book, this part goes in the second part of the book, this part goes in the third. And then once I had all those quotes from everyone in the 3 sections, I went through and started to compose the narrative because I wanted to be one long
Hmm.
conversation. And I didn't want, I talked to a couple other publishers before I landed with Jawbone, who were fantastic. And they wanted me to kind of essentially dumb it down. Like they said, how about we just do a chapter on hecklers, or a chapter, they wanted to chapter it and make it kind of like a
Uh,
bathroom reader book. And I was like, I want
yeah.
this to be able to be picked up and put down because it's their words. It's, I
Yeah.
wanted to keep me out of it. But I'm like, the narrative is very intentional. So the book took a lot of time to organize in a way that I wanted it to feel like one long conversation that delves into mental health and depression issues and stuff like that, and then moves into combativeness with the crowd, and then slides into hotels versus comedy club condos. And so it took that took when I had all the nuts and bolts of, okay, all the stuff's transcribed, everything is chunked out. Now the easy part, the fun part is putting the book together. And boy, that was when the work really started, because
Sure.
I not that I did a lot of revisions, but I really had to trust my gut in being like, all right, this flows into this, and this flows into this, and this flows into this, like a big mixtape. Just kind of.
Yeah.
It was essentially by that point curating the story that I wanted to tell, more so than just plugging in. Because if you plug it in, it's not going to be engaging. And if you plug it in, it's going to feel like what it on the surface is, which is a collection of interviews plugged in. And I didn't want that. My job then was to tell a story with these interviews. And so hopefully that is the end result. I tried really hard to have it happen, but I spent a good, I would say, 1/3 of all that time on assembling the actual book when all of the parts were done. And then I had to sell it.
Yeah. That's a whole
you know,
other thing.
so that's
Marketing
the other
is,
thing is
yeah.
that, because I'm a DIY guy, I had my last 2 books, I had essentially self-published, but I had put out a zine, and so I had channels. I could get it into Barnes and
Sure.
Noble. I had a Ingram is who I used, who was my old distributor, and so that was I could do that. I could put out a book and people could get it, and they did fine. But for this book, it needed a larger platform. Like I wanted it to be uh, available in airports and stuff like that. And so, um, uh, having done all that work while doing stand up and everything else in the meantime, there's no guarantee of, well, it's like the YouTube thing, right? Like you can put all the
Oh,
money
yeah.
into the production and the time. There's no guarantee there's going to be a fancy carrot at the end of that stick. And so, uh, I feel fortunate that uh, Jawbone, I've really loved their stuff and their aesthetic. They're London based. This is their first non music book ever. So that's pretty great. Like I feel really proud about that. Eddie Pepitone wrote the forward, and
Good. Yeah.
so yeah, it was a lot of work though, man. It was a really lot of work, but I think it's the most accomplished thing I've done in terms of a product. And
Yeah.
I don't say
Yeah.
product sounding like commerce. That sounds like
Yeah.
something that's going to get hit with a tariff. But a product in terms of the end result, I'm very happy with it. And as a creative person, that's hard to do, you know.
Sure.
And
Sure.
so I'm satisfied with the end result. And now hopefully people like it. Now I just got to get it out there,
Get it
you
out
know.
there and
And here we are, you know.
available wherever you get them. You can get it on ebooks as well. And
Yeah, it'll be all that. Essentially, it comes out July 8th worldwide, every format everywhere. Um, and I have some authors' copies right now. But essentially, actually, due to tariffs, like everything bottlenecked because it's shipping from London via boat, you
oh
know. And
gosh, yeah.
so it was
There you
supposed to
go.
be out right now, but we had to push it to July because I didn't realize Barnes and Noble and Amazon and all those places pre-sales. If your product is late, they just cancel the pre-sales
Oh
and
gosh.
refund everyone's money. And I was like, what? They don't say it's running late and we'll ship it in 2 weeks. They just cancel everything and you have to reorder it. So
Gosh.
once the publisher told me that, I'm like, we can't do that. So we pushed the release date to give us a window. So yeah, July 8th, it's out everywhere on all digital and
Awesome.
all that sort of
That's
stuff.
that's fantastic. Great book, and you got so many. You got big names in here, and then
Mhm.
people who we haven't heard from
Yeah.
or are far from being household names, and it gives you the nuts and bolts of, hey, if I'm really interested in stand up, this is a great book to see, how it's done,
Hmm.
how people feel going through all this, and the dues you
Right.
all have to pay to
Right.
really get out there. It's
Yeah,
very
because
eye-opening.
that's great to hear because there's a weird, well, it's not weird, but there's a circumstance where people either think you have to be Jerry Seinfeld or it's not real, or they just don't
Hmm.
know. And I think there's a lot of curiosity about like what does it like what is this job, the day to day of it, like what is the ups and the downs of the career. And so I hope people can kind of get value out of it. And I also tried to make it a degree of evergreen in terms of I didn't really dive in too hard into current kind of uh, controversies or hot button topics or anything like that because I want it to be a book that in 10 years someone who's interested in comedy or getting into stand up can pick it up and still get value out of it. I didn't
Hmm.
want it to feel dated.
Right, exactly. It's
And
not
so
going to
there's a little,
date.
yeah. So there's a little bit at the end of the book about COVID and post COVID and what that was like. Because some people quit. Some people just never came
Yeah.
back. And they just their life stopped and they said, "I like this better, actually," or
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
just moved on to other things. You know, and so it was felt important to mention that, but it's really only a couple pages talking about COVID stuff. I didn't want to live there. You know,
Yeah.
um, so hopefully people get value out of it. Yeah, man, I appreciate you
Yeah.
having that experience with it because that's the goal, is to kind of
Yeah.
open people's eyes and kind of you know a little bit of a reveal warts and all.
Good. Well, thanks for stopping by. I hope to see you in Atlanta maybe one day once you
Yeah,
come
yeah,
through
yeah.
here.
I said I'll be there. I think it's the first Friday in August with Eddie
Oh,
Pepitone.
nice,
Uh,
nice and hot. I moved down here, oh gosh, close to 4 decades ago in August. It's a little steamy here at that time.
oh man,
We
yeah.
we
I usually well these days I go where they send me, but I remember that area can get you get the humidity there,
yeah,
which
big time. Big
I
time.
usually it's brutally humid right now in Austin, which is kind of strange. But I've done New Orleans in July also and went through like 9 shirts, going, "What am
Oh
I
yeah.
doing here? Like this is unsustainable." But yeah,
Yeah.
doingtimecomedy.com has all the pre-links and everything like that. And I really appreciate you having me on, man. It's great to talk to you.
Yeah. Thanks for coming by. I appreciate
Absolutely.
it. Take
Yeah, thank
care.
you. See ya.
Bye-bye. Well, thank you for listening to our long discussion. JT enjoys talking, and I don't enjoy interrupting very much. As you might know by listening to my podcast, I like getting out as much as I can from my interviewees, and they tell their story, and he is insanely prolific. Great guy, has really paid his dues. been all over the country, probably the world, and has got so many great stories. He needs to go on Joe Rogan. I really thought he was on there. I don't know why I thought he was on there because he lives in Austin, so it's like that's the name there. But I think he has played at Joe's Comedy Club there, as he said earlier in this interview. Anyway, thank you so much for dropping by, and we'll do it again. I'm keeping this thing going. I know some podcasters are ending their programs, but yeah, I'll keep getting people on here. Hopefully, more comedians. Really enjoy that. Anyway, see you or hear from you next time.